From that, there's 4 of them that oversee patrol teams. We have 4 patrol teams. And then we have a detective sergeant, a traffic sergeant, and an administrative services sergeant. That administrative services sergeant is a catch-all kind of sergeant who works directly under me. And really it helps a ton when it comes to policy implementation, some of our oversight items. He's the community emergency response team, assists with Jackie and I with our CERT team and many other tasks and duties. So we have 2 buildings. One is at our headquarters at 110 East Main Street, where our council chambers and our other town offices are. And that's where our support services, the chief, and myself operate out of, Jackie as well. Our other building is over here on the boulevard. Some of you that are in CERT have probably been down there. And that's right next to Whole Foods. And that's where our operations building is. And that's where our operations captain would work out of. So there we have investigations, property and evidence, and our patrol team. So we have 7 sergeants dispersed between those 2 buildings. Below that, we have a corporal program. That corporal program is responsible for our training of our new recruits, and they also take on a lot of other ancillary duties. And then we have our officers. We are recruiting officers heavily. We have 2 officers currently in training that are set to probably get off of training in the next 2 weeks, which is wonderful. That helps our staffing numbers. And then we are actually expecting another officer to come to us beginning October 11th, I believe. So we're heavily recruiting, training, and planning for the succession that's continuing throughout our department. For 39 officers that basically cover all of Los Gatos and Montessorino. Montessorino is a contract city for us. So Los Gatos, we're looking at 12 square miles. And about 30, well, between Los Gatos and Montessorino, we oversee 34,000 residents. That's who we provide services to. Just to give you an idea of the call volume that may come in from that. So our dispatch center in a year's time looks at about 34,000 calls coming into the dispatch center. And I think currently we are at just about 1,600 case reports this year. As of today's date, or yesterday, I think I had the numbers ran, and we're looking at about 300 arrests at this time. That fluctuates, and I'll talk about some of those, the reasoning behind the fluctuations in arrests. Some of that just because of state mandates changing, the laws changing, and COVID really put an impact on things. So a little bit further into what it takes to be a police officer. Since we are recruiting, so if any of you know of anybody, have them get a hold of us. But let me tell you what it takes to be a police officer to put on this uniform. So currently, it's 888 hours of training in the academy. The academy is about 23 weeks long. They undergo training in defensive tactics, communication, de-escalation, a lot of, obviously, looking into the laws, understanding the elements of crime, understanding how to interact with people. And then they have to go into all those traffic stop, how to operate the vehicles with emergency lights. It is very different from going into just your own personal car to going into a patrol car. The patrol car has many tools, many functions to it. It's very complex. So they need to know how to operate all of that and do so safely. We all know that divided attention can create safety hazards, right? So we want to make sure that folks get a proper amount of training there. They undergo fair and impartial policing, diversity training. When I went to the academy a long time ago, they actually flew us down to LA to go to the Museum of Tolerance. That was very moving. That was 20 years ago. To this day, I remember how moving that museum is. So that's just kind of how to get an officer on board here. They have to go through a very lengthy oral board, a medical, a psychological exam, polygraph, personal history questionnaire, several oral boards actually with the command staff and many peers, and we always bring in a community member to kind of give us their lens of how this individual may fit within our police department and provide services to our community. So once we bring somebody on, then they go through our field training program. And that field training program is on average of about 16 weeks long. So we're looking at another 4 months after that academy. So you have about 6-month academy, then another 4 months of field training. And that's really bringing them into the folds of the culture here of our police department and the community as well. And when I talk about culture, it's just, here's how we deliver our services. And where we really pride ourselves at Los Gatos Monitoring Police Department is that personalized and empathetic, compassionate approach where we have the opportunity to take the time and to sit down and to talk to people, to get out and interact in our community, to get to know people by name. That's huge. That's not at every department. And I can say that I've worked for 3 different departments. I started out, as Marianne said, at Monterey County Sheriff's Department. There's several hundred deputies there. I spent a couple of years working in the jails down there and doing bailiff work, primarily working in the jails. From there, I lateral to Pacific Grove Police Department. I spent about 6 years there. It's a small department, but I had an opportunity to work on a countywide task force, if you will, related to violent crimes and cold case homicides. So I had the opportunity to spend 3 years as a detective there before promoting out. In that time working as a detective, I did have, and that task force, I had an opportunity to work with a lot of other agencies that gave me an appreciation for staying at a small agency. When I chose to lateral to another agency, I knew that I wanted to still stay small, because what values stuck with me is being able to get to know the folks that I have an opportunity to make a positive impact on. In law enforcement, we don't always get to meet people on their best day. That's the firefighters, and I can give the firefighter jokes because I'm married to one. So, but for us, when we interact with folks, it might be the worst moment of their life. And having an opportunity to be that individual I may not be able to tell them that it's going to be okay, but I can be empathetic, I can sit there with them, I can give them the resources, instead of just passing them on to one person and the next and the next. And that, coming back to what our culture is here at our police department, it is having that opportunity to interact with people, to be that positive impact on them, and to be able to provide those resources and provide the follow-up that's necessary as well. Tomorrow will actually be my 20th year in law enforcement. And it seemed like it went by very, very quickly. So different times now though, right? So 2001, September 24th, 2001 was 2 weeks after 9/11. The way the world looked at law enforcement was much different then. It was a much different time. The pendulum has swung the other direction. The value in having that time in law enforcement is to give that holistic understanding that things happen in our communities, they happen throughout the world, that gives a different focus, different emphasis, and leads to some of the reform we're looking at today. And that's okay. Sometimes that's needed. So to get back a little bit more to our police department, I talked about the sworn side. We have an investigations division. Our investigations division is overseen by a sergeant, and we have 5 officers assigned within there. So they oversee general crimes, sex crimes, domestic violence, property crimes. We heavily focus in investigations on persons crimes because those are the longest lasting. It really hits at the core of our community, especially any of them that may have to do with our youth. We have a very large youth population in Los Gatos, and so we do put a lot of resources in supporting them with our school resource officer that is assigned to investigations and any kind of juvenile related investigations. I had an opportunity to work for 4 years as the juvenile detective here, and I can tell you it's very rewarding, but we do have a pretty heavy caseload, and that's both from the lens of juveniles getting into mischief or juveniles being a victim of a crime. And so we do apply the resources to make sure to be supportive to the family and to those juveniles. So a little bit about that. And so now talking about the non-sworn. Our non-sworn folks, you've met Jackie Rose, many of you. We also have community service officers, and we have 2 of those. They each are, they're both college students. And so what we try to do is support that age range, and where it's been really successful for us is we really look to hire on community service officers that are interested in law enforcement that we can develop along the way and really invest in. And they're out there in the community driving a smaller car that says Los Gatos Montesino Police Department and a light blue shirt. And they're college students, like I mentioned. But many of our officers went through that program and then later on, after they completed college, pursued a career in law enforcement. So it's investing into that age range early on, and then a lot of times we've benefited from that as a department because they've really stuck with us. They enjoyed it here. What I can say is that we do have retention within our police department. So I'm proud of that, because people don't stay somewhere where they don't feel like they're a part of something, or where they don't belong, or where they're not making a difference. So it tells me with our retention rates that our officers do truly feel that. That's wonderful. So the community service officers, they are not sworn, they do not carry a gun, they are in a uniform. In addition, we have, looking up here, so dispatch, we have 8 allotted positions for our communications, or our dispatchers. Currently, we are down to 4 in there right now, and we're training 2. We just ran an oral board yesterday to hire on more. The training, as you heard earlier, it takes quite some time to get training going for them. In addition, one of our force multipliers that Jackie oversees that I do want to touch on is our volunteers. So everybody in the room that's a CERT, thank you. You are extra eyes and ears for us in the event of an emergency. That's huge because we never know when that's going to happen. And we see so many emergencies happen throughout the nation today, whether it be a flood-related event, some issue that jeopardizes the water, and you'll see a flyer here today where there's a drill that will be hosted by CERT on November 3rd, where there's going to be practice surrounding how we would operate if our water was jeopardized. In addition to wildfires, that's a big one. So whether or not the flames reach us, the smoke can absolutely be damaging for anybody that has any experience with asthma or other impacts that smoke may cause. So if we have a fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains, whether or not those flames reach our community, the panic that it will drive with it, the evacuation from the mountains, the smoke that will bring down, the embers that it will bring down, we will need to lean on our volunteers to be able to be the extra eyes and ears to check on their neighbors, to make sure that they're okay, and to tell us what those needs are. Because with 39 officers, we can't be everywhere. We need to triage, and we need to lean on our community members that have a higher level of training to be able to be calm, provide support, and understand some of the steps that are going to be in place, or maybe to be able to sustain for 72 hours or longer. And I know the terraces have a backup generator. They have a lot of equipment and support in place to make sure that that can happen. In addition, on our volunteers, we have a victim services unit. And that's wonderful because we have volunteers that can reach out to victims or secondary victims. And when I say that, if we have a fatality, that's unfortunate, absolutely unfortunate, but our officers have to focus on that investigation. Our victim services unit volunteers may come out and provide support to people on scene or family members, which is great to have, so we can make sure to focus our efforts on getting a thorough investigation done, but be also empathetic and compassionate to the needs of people that are impacted. In addition, we have DART, our Disaster Aid Response Team. That is, in essence, a tier above CERT. They do our search and rescue. They are looking at implementing a drone program. They're looking at search and rescue by horse, so they have a few more tools available to them. We also have volunteer in policing. Those are volunteers that help around our police department with other auxiliary duties that maybe our staff just cannot totally get to, and Jackie oversees that piece. One of the volunteer programs that I love and have a passion for is our Explorer program. So ages 14 to 21, kids that are just coming into those teenage years that are a little bit awkward and trying to find their way. We bring them in, we teach them how to do fingerprints, we teach them ride-alongs, how to do traffic enforcement, and we really try to help them to find their voice. If any of you have had the opportunity to interact with a 14-year-old, their focus is here, right? There's a phone, or there's a Nintendo or something like that. We try to bring them out of their shell, and it's really fun. We put them on the radio, and initially they have what we call mic fright. So you hear this little itty bitty voice coming over the radio, tell them to dig down deep. People have to hear you. You need to get your message across. And so they will help us with events like the children's parade during Christmas time, or Fiesta Day Arts that we had this last weekend. We had some explorers out there. They may help us with traffic control. And I can tell you that traffic control is one of the worst spots to be assigned to in law enforcement, because apparently everybody likes to go one way home, and there is no other way to get home. So at that traffic control point, when they are having to redirect somebody to go somewhere else, they are generally not very happy about it. So they learn a little bit of that de-escalation, or what we sometimes call verbal judo, of trying to work through those problems, problem solving, how to communicate, how to not get stressed, and how to be professional. Because when you tell somebody that they have to go another route, they generally are not ready to receive that information. So we help our explorers work through that, and they really grow. By the time they leave our program, they're this whole new embodied person, and it's really neat to see them flourish. So that's just a little bit about our police department. Now I want to go into some of the equipment and resources. There's a lot of questions about where we put our funding, why the police department can be so expensive, or what it is we do to reach that transparency level. And that's a lot of what we hear, the narrative, the community wanting. And we're absolutely open to sharing with the community what it is that we do. So for instance, this device here that looks like a pager, this little square device here, it's a body worn camera. So if I push on it, it would start recording. If I drop this mic, it would probably make a noise loud enough to sound similar to a gunshot. If there's something that loud, it automatically turns on, it triggers. So anything that sounds similar or is a gunshot related. And then I have to manually turn it off. I can't override it. It is uploaded to a cloud system. We can't delete it. There's a retention schedule that goes with that for a couple of years. And it can pick up voices from quite a distance away. So this device is huge to us, because if we're in a conversation with somebody and it's positive, or maybe it becomes contentious, this is capturing everything. What that allows for the officer to do is not to always have the notebook and pen in their hand. They can have their hands free if they need to, so they can get to resources if they need to. They can use their mic if they need to. And they can pay more attention to the conversation at hand, and then later go back and review it. Where we found this hugely beneficial is when somebody says, hey, you know, one of your officers said something negative to me or treated me like this. And then we absolutely go back immediately and take a look at the body worn camera video coverage. And it is tagged with a date, a time, the report number. Technology is amazing these days. So it's wonderful that we have this. Now, also in our cars, we have the same thing. We have mobile audio video, and we have that as soon as the back seat of a car, of one of the patrol cars opens up. It usually opens up if we're putting somebody in or taking somebody out. The back seat is generally not where folks want to be. And there's a camera back there. There's video, and there's audio that's captured back there immediately, and it can't be deleted again. The front of the cars have several cameras that capture in many different directions. I forget what the span is, but it's quite wide. So as they hit their lights, as soon as the lights are activated or the siren, it starts capturing everything that's taking place in front of them. So we'll capture the traffic stop, it will capture the subject encounter, whatever that might be. There's also GPS in the cars, so we know where our officers are going, how fast they're going there, where they were, and for how long. So Big Brother is really, truly watching, but it's wonderful because if there is any concern on how their interaction or how they conducted themselves or whether or not they were by policy, we can go back and address that in a timely fashion. And that's absolutely important. So that's just some of the tools that we have on our person. In addition, I brought some of the other equipment. So you may see, I have a duty belt on, and then many of our officers have the option to wear this outer vest carrier. It looks very militaristic maybe, but it disperses the weight load. This weighs, all my gear together weighs about 23 pounds. So it's about a fifth of my weight. So foot chases can be a little slower than most may think. But that disperses the weight. It minimizes injury on our officers. That's why they wear it. There's a vest inside of that. So they can just throw that on or take it off. And it carries all the equipment dispersed in a similar manner. Now, I'm a smaller person, so think of me more like an apartment. Some of our officers are more like a ranchette. So they have more room to disperse different tools on them. So my taser, I wear as a leg holster because I don't have the room on there, nor the room on my belt. So we have tasers, there's a tourniquet on there, there's a baton, handcuffs, radio, the standard items. But I just at least want to point out some of the items that are a little bit more new over maybe the last 10 years. Some other stuff that we have coming out, we are going to be implementing a training tool for our officers. It's a virtual reality. So basically putting on these goggles, it brings them into a room that we can manipulate the different encounters. That allows for them that real-time training. What's also neat about it, we can have our community members, we can bring our community members to try this as well. It should be coming in about the next month or so. So this is a tool that we hope to provide a lens for folks to have an opportunity to see the engagement that sometimes officers have to make very quick split-second decisions in. We can also use it for mental health related calls and how to interact there, because that's a situation that we're seeing more and more of. We have a vulnerable community response team. And what that is basically a sergeant oversees team of folks that they do follow up on mental health calls. Mental health is not a crime, but it is a call that we frequently go to. It needs a lot of resources, time, training, and de-escalation. So we have almost all of our officers that have training with crisis intervention techniques. We also have a SNAP program that Jackie oversees, and it stands for Special Needs Awareness Program. I just know it's a SNAP program. But what that does is folks can call in, register with Jackie that they have a loved one that may have certain special needs that officers need to know about before they encounter or come upon that person, because maybe they're very light sensitive, maybe loud noises really get them worked up. And we don't want to escalate any situation. We want to de-escalate. We don't want to have to use our tools. So just a couple of the programs that we have that can help with the mental health needs and even the homeless population within our community. Given the time a little bit, I'm going to jump ahead and talk a little bit about the big tag words of reform, transparency, police legitimacy. So I was talking to Mary Ann a little bit earlier. She was asking about our police oversight. So end of last year, it was brought to the attention of our council that the community had an interest, a strong interest, in an unbiased review of any further police complaints that should come in. And We don't receive very many. We receive probably less than I can count my hand each year, but one of those can be very damaging when we see what happened with the murder of George Floyd last May. That changed a lot of things and created an outcry really of reform. So something that came out of that was an interest in the independent police auditor, and that we call it IPA. It's an oversight of any complaints that should come into the police department. So how does that change things for us? If there's a complaint that comes in, it doesn't come directly to me. It goes directly to our town attorney. He reviews it, determines whether or not there's a policy violation, a conduct or a criminal violation, and if it warrants investigation. If it does, then he has outside resources that he will then contact and identify one of those resources and have that outside resource do the investigation. So what that means is that the police department works with that outside auditor or investigator and provides the outside investigator all the police reports, the body worn camera, the video that's maybe from the patrol car, whatever it might be, access to the officer or to the individual that's involved. And they do all the investigation, including working with a community member that has a concern that brought it forward. Once that investigation is completed, then the town attorney receives it, reviews it, and if it feels that it's at a completed point, it then goes to our police chief, whomever that is at that point, and the police chief then reviews it. The police chief has the ultimate say in any kind of action, punitive action that comes from that. If the police chief doesn't feel that it was done thoroughly, has concerns or questions, that goes back to the town attorney, back to the auditor, and they will then determine whether follow-up is needed or a second unbiased investigation is completed. So that's essentially the process that comes there with our oversight, or the independent police auditor, as we call it. It's available on the town website. Somebody can walk in and bring in the form. They could do it by email. So that's the IPA that we call it. Just an overview there. Another thing that we've done is we've put on our Los Gatos Montessorino Police Department webpage a transparency link. If you go to that webpage, the first thing you see is this burgundy block. You hover on it and click it, and it gives you all sorts of information into our training that our officers undergo, use of force, any kind of public records requests that have been provided. Provides a lot of information on our communication center, how quickly they answer the dispatch calls, how many calls they receive. So we're just trying to put all the information out there. We are public safety, yes, but it's so important that we have the trust of our community that will allow us to go out there and to police the community. We only exist with the trust of our community. And so we are trying to really instill that, and that we want to work with our community, that we want our community to trust us. So we're trying to listen to what the needs truly are. DOJ is putting out a mandate by January 1st, 2022, that we have to do a couple of things. One of them is the Racial Identity Profiling Act. And what that means is, starting as of January 1st, we have to report on any discretionary encounter. So a pedestrian stop, a traffic stop, and that officer has to fill out on the computer information on what they perceive that person's race, gender, age, several other data points, LGBTQ, and it's all based on a perception. And then DOJ compiles that information throughout all of next year, and will report it out to the community the following year. All agencies throughout California have to do this reporting system. So we are going to begin that October 4th of this year, just to start getting our officers trained up on that. And then we will start reporting it January 1st, and that's a DOJ mandate. Another item that we will have to do, all of our officers will have to do on reports, is hit a lot more data points in their investigations, their reports, Department of Justice wants to know a lot more information in terms of our victim, our suspect, how they're related, all the different elements in the case. So the state is asking for us to do a lot more to be transparent, and so that they can report out through a non-biased secondary auditing function, essentially. So that's a little bit from that transparency component and legitimacy. Reform. So reform can be, I choose to look at the word more as redefine. So where we're looking at now is how do we redefine the way that we engage with our community? And it's a lot of these things that I already talked about today. It's about being here right now, talking with all of you, putting a face to who we are, humanizing the badge, listening to the concerns that come in, the community wanting the unbiased oversight. Okay, we can do that. The interest in a transparency page, so we put all of our information out there. More than happy to share that. We're proud of our profession. I love when I was on patrol having a ride along, getting to show folks around the community, to do a few traffic stops with them in the car, seeing people's eyes light up when the sirens go on or whatever it may be. We're proud and we're happy to show what we do. But sometimes we're not very good about vocalizing that. So all of these tools is allowing us to be able to do that, to be transparent, to build that legitimacy through our community, and to be able to redefine how we engage with the needs that our community is crying out for, really. So if you look at how the eras of policing have gone from, go back to 1829, the founder of modern policing, Sir Robert Peel, back in 1829, to where we're at now has evolved significantly through 3 different eras. The era that we've been in, I believe it's since the 1980s, is community problem solving. And we're still there, we're still continuing forward. This reform or redefine how law enforcement operates, engages, trains is just part of this era that we're in, and we're willing to work with it. So, with all of that being said, I'd like to open it up to any kind of questions.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that you repeat any questions that are asked so people will know. I have a volunteer that will take this on.
Judy?
Okay, that's
Is this on?
yes.
I have a traffic question.
Okay,
Between Los Gatos Boulevard and Union Avenue, we have a speedway. I'd like to know if the traffic department looks at that every once in a while and evaluates it. I've been here 14 years and it's getting worse and louder. And I really think somebody should take a good look at it. You have a sign that blinks saying 25 miles an hour, forget it. But the noise is increasing, and I don't know what the regulations are for motors and mufflers, but it's getting ridiculous. And I'm reporting it to you.
okay. Would you like me to still report it, Mary Ann, since she talked to the mic?
Yeah, we need to pass it along.
So if I could just touch on that for a moment. You're probably talking about Blossom Hill here? Yes, so between Union and those guys, we have received complaints and concerns on that. Our fatality that occurred last year out here in front of Blossom Hill School. We did have the community come forward and they were very concerned about the speed along there. There was a number of community meetings that our traffic sergeant went to. They have worked with the town engineer, traffic engineer, to look at some of the angles there. And I know that they put out the speed trailer. And what the speed trailer does when somebody goes by, it identifies what the speed is. And I believe, I would have to double check with the traffic engineer, but they have done several studies. I'm not sure what the outcome of those studies are, just speaking to speed at this point. I do know that we have continued to, I believe last month, put out that trailer down, just past Regent, just past Union, going that direction. But as for the noise, there are noise violations when it comes to the mufflers. But when it comes to noise, one of the rules, I'll apply it to like music. If you can hear it 75 feet or further from a vehicle, at least when it comes to music, that is probable cause for us to pull over that vehicle. When it comes to a muffler, I would have to double check the vehicle code to see what the noise violation is.
It's mostly the motors,
The motors,
and it's getting worse, and I never see a policeman down there.
yeah. Okay, oh, fair. The traffic sergeant works under me, so I can absolutely pass the concern along. So, yeah, it's noted.
Where's the microphone?
Just send it over
She has it over here.
She's tracking it.
Another traffic question has to do with Fisher School and Van Meter School. We're very used to Blossom Hill School. We know when it starts, when it stops. There's a lot of congestion. But what I've seen over at Fisher School mixed with Van Meter, when they depart the campus, they have crossing guards, except they don't have them at University and Los Gatos Boulevard. And the kids don't know the traffic rules. And it needs community action to get the kids at Fisher who haven't been attending school for the last year and a half to understand those traffic lights apply to them too. They don't have bumpers.
Jackie, can you take a few notes on this?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Then I just need a little clarification. Are you talking about both intersections on Blossom Hill? Like Roberts Road and University, or?
Of the intersection of Blossom Hill Road and University Avenue.
Thank you.
Blossom Hill and University.
Got it.
So we oversee or we facilitate the crossing guard program through our traffic sergeant. We have 13 locations that crossing guards are assigned to. If a crossing guard is not available, they have had some staffing problems with being able to recruit enough crossing guards. Last understanding I had, as of last week, they were able to fill all of those spots. I will have to double check if that is a location. But what I also hear, and thank you for bringing that forward, is that it's not just about crossing guards, it's about educating the juveniles as well. And so that's key. That's wonderful to hear and get that feedback, because we have a school resource officer that his primary emphasis is not so much enforcement as it is education. And so that's critical, and we want to make we want to keep those kids safe. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll pass it along to our school resource officer.
Does your department have a K-9 unit?
Yes, we do. Thank you. We have a K-9 unit. We have one of our corporals, Katrina Freeman. So she's been with our department now for, gosh, I want to say maybe 6 years. And she has a German Shepherd, and Jackie, she's had him 3 years? Yeah, 3 years. So we do have one K-9 currently. He's trained on some search techniques, and he's also a bomb dog. So it's a county resource. He just received certification as a bomb dog, gosh, maybe in June or so. We were able to send him to bomb school. So that was very valuable. And I believe he was called out even to assist at the county level with several incidents so far. Yeah,
I'm just wondering, of the time spent by a police officer, is a small percentage of that just local things? Or are they family things, or are they drug-related things, or what other things do they do along those lines, please?
thank you for that question. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I overlooked that on my notes here. So crime trends. primarily of those 1,500, 1,600 reports that our officers have taken this year, it was related to burglaries and thefts. So by burglary, when somebody, if you come home and your door has been forced open, it's a forced entry into a dwelling or a location. So potentially your vehicle, if your vehicle is locked and they break the window to get into your vehicle, you're now a victim of a burglary. If your vehicle is unlocked though, and they open the door and just grab your purse or whatever it is, that is a theft. So, so burglary versus the thefts. So a felony is $950 or more for thefts. And under is a misdemeanor. But primarily our officers deal with thefts and burglaries. They also deal with, in terms of, that's the property focus, and most of our calls are related to property crimes. But when it comes to persons crimes, what we see the most is mental health and domestic violence. So now it can go through different themes, if you will. With COVID, it was interesting because we did see some changes in what was our norm. And we believe that some of that was there's a reduction in residential burglaries. Well, more people were home because they couldn't go anywhere. So they were working from home. They weren't out traveling as much. So we didn't see as many accidents for a while because there just wasn't that much back and forth. The roadways were not as congested. So we did see a reduction in some of our, what we would normally see as our certain crime numbers. But we believe that that was due to just the pattern of life changing with COVID.
There's a question in the chat. Do the police vehicles have decibel meters to measure noise levels at specific distances from vehicles?
No, they do not. With decibel meters, that is something that's maintained primarily with our code enforcement. Code enforcement is not under the police department, but they're a separate department from us. But we do have access to them if we need them. Given that we are small, 150 employees for the town, we all know each other pretty well by name. If we have different tools that we need from one another, we work together.
There's an additional question in the chat. The increased number of electric or even noisy gas-powered bikes, scooters, are putting kids at risk, not wearing helmets, speeding, ignoring safety protocols, and having multiple riders on the vehicles are setting us up for more injuries and death amongst kids. Can action be taken to educate kids, parents, and to enforce the safety laws?
Thank you for that.
Repeat the question.
Sure. So the question was related to the loud bikes, some of the motorized scooters that we see, and where there's multiple occupants on those bikes or scooters, and educating them for their overall safety and enforcing the laws if necessary, I believe is kind of a synopsis of it. So thank you for that question. It's timely. And the reason I said that is this week we are doing 10 bike rodeos throughout the schools that we provide services to. Our traffic sergeant was at one this morning, just one today, right?
We had one school, 2 sessions.
Which one?
We had one school, 2 sessions, so it was over 200 kids.
Yeah, so over 200 kids went to what they call a bike rodeo. It's just a neat term to put on educating the kids on that exact information. Wearing a helmet, they're allowed to bring there's bikes that are there for them to try and ride through a course, to have some understanding of safety concerns, and even the motorized bikes is something that is touched upon. Yesterday, I know that he went to 2 or 3 schools and did bike rodeos. The interim chief went to that one today as well to show the support and the need to educate the youth. Because I have seen them, especially on Los Gatos Boulevard. I've seen them over there. Now, it can be difficult to maneuver to get caught up to a bike with our patrol cars, and we certainly don't want to cause harm to anybody else in the community. So what we've done is lean on our motor unit. We have 2 motorcycles. One is assigned to each patrol team. As we have teams on the front side of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every other Thursday, and then teams on the back side of the week have a motorcycle unit during the daytime as well.
I want to thank you for your service, and I also appreciate that you have to perform in a certain way where whoever you're dealing with can do whatever they want. And I know it's not an easy job, and I just thank you so much, and please thank all the officers that have come to this town. We're very fortunate to live here.
Thank you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It means a lot every time we hear that, because when we hear that, and just in the way that you say it, it's thought out. It sounds like it's absolutely genuine. And that means a lot to me, because it tells me that we're doing the right service for the community, for all of you. Because you're our raters. We need to know, do we need to make those adjustments? Do we need to redefine? And if so, we're open ears. We don't know what we're doing. We certainly have policies and procedures in place, but we don't know if we're not hitting that 10 out of 10 mark if we don't get that feedback. So it's wonderful. Thank you for your support. But if there are concerns, whether it's related to traffic, enforcement of laws, or education that's needed, that's helpful as well, because we know that we need to be adaptable in this career field. And maybe we need to pivot in that direction or pivot in another direction to be able to achieve all of our goals.
I was wondering, is John Costa still doing your CIT training? Or do you ever send the officers to the 40-hour training presented by other agencies?
Yes, so John Costa is, he's a liaison to the hospitals. And so with mental health, given that it's not a crime, like I mentioned, it's a medical situation in many cases. There's HIPAA laws related to it. The individual, John Costa, is the liaison to law enforcement for the medical field. And so when we interact with folks repeatedly that may need assistance, and we need to guide down a path of getting follow-up from a mental health doctor, John is the one that we go to, and he also has a team of other folks. But he's a wonderful resource to us, and know John well. And then the second part of your question of the training, yes, about 90% of our officers have been sent to the crisis intervention technique course, the 40-hour course. That gives us all those tools on how to engage with folks that maybe are under mental health crisis. Just because they're in a crisis at that moment doesn't mean that on many other days they don't operate in the same manner as many of us do. Sometimes there's just something that spikes in that moment or in that time of their life that they need that additional support, and some resources and follow-up resources are key as well. So absolutely, our goal is to have 100% of our officers trained. We wait until our officers are off of field training programs before we send them. We have also sent our dispatchers as well. And the reason there is they are that first voice that people hear. We call them, they are truly our first line. They calm folks down. They use those skills over the phone. They're not necessarily the eyes and ears, but they are that calming voice amongst chaos sometimes that a citizen needs. Any questions?
Could you say something about the paramedics and the connection?
So that's a separate resource from us. Now, what I can say is if somebody dials 911 and that call goes to our dispatch center, they immediately triage it, and then we'll connect a medical related call to the paramedics or to medical resources. Usually that comes with the fire department as well. So they immediately connect that line. They stay on the line with the caller, and then they make sure that the appropriate ambulance, fire department comes out as well. We work with them on scenes. If the ambulance is there and we have a victim or an individual that is in the ambulance, then we work with them to understand if now is the time to talk with that person, or if you need to ride an ambulance to go to the hospital or follow the ambulance. But when they show up on scene, we're very thankful for them because we don't have that level of medical training. We can certainly provide CPR, basic life-saving measures, but they have many other tools that are there. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. I hope that this was enlightening to a few things of your local police department.
I hope you all found out more about our police department. And I think we're finding that it's very community-based, getting into the fire department as well, social departments, trying to have us connected with everything. And we're so lucky to have a police department that is so compassionate and so caring. And again, thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I was going to take a picture of it. Thank you so much. All right, great.
Uh-huh.